I didn't anticipate it spanning such a wide spectrum of manifestations, from wanting to have more acorns, to more muscle, to more land for your country, to more money, all these kinds of things. It's really interesting that there is this drive that can be, in many cases, to our detriment or the detriment of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something up with it, but there's also something so human about it that it's,
Yeah, we relate to it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Part of what makes the human mind so interesting and, greater than anything we've ever discovered in terms of its complexity and ability is that we do have the ability to think a little outside of our current situation. It's
Mm-hmm.
a mature ability that I think a lot of people either don't ever get to or get to later in life and say, this is what I need to do now, but I need to put aside some resources or do some planning for what I need to do later. A person
Yes.
I'm imagining I will be.
Yes, we can conceive of the future that might be approaching. Hey everybody, I'm Cody.
And I'm Evan.
Welcome back to Men's Search for Meaning,
the podcast where we explore concepts that we can all relate to and walk away with a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we think.
All right, so the idea for this one came to me listening to something on NPR, which is not something that I routinely do. I just happened to be browsing through the radio while driving, and they were talking about people in Taiwan who were doing military training. And after listening to it for 15 minutes or so, it turned out that what's going on is a lot of the people in Taiwan don't feel that their government could protect them if they were invaded by China. So the interesting thing for me was China is a massive world superpower. Why would they feel the need to expand further and take over this country? And that might even sound like a silly question at first, because I think there's this living notion that, oh, because they want to be bigger, they want to have more power, they want to, I don't know, occupy half of the world or something. But it points to this idea of when is it enough? And so that's where this idea of sort of more comes in. Do they need to do that? On one hand, absolutely not, but there would be some motivation that would cause that to happen. And it got me thinking about just that concept of how we as individuals often strive for more in situations where we might not need more. Those are subjective definitions. But I think it's interesting and something I wanted to explore, especially with your perspective and with the perspective of our viewers as well, to get people's take on this. But it does feel like there is this inherent human drive to pursue more, and it's usually around resources or space, which I guess is a resource. So yeah, what are your kind of opening thoughts on this subject? What stands out to you, or does it strike you the same way that it does me? What do you think?
Well, I think it's an interesting subject. In a certain way, it's one that people have talked a lot about. It's similar to the concept of hedonic adaptation, where, once you have achieved something, now it becomes your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And now you want something beyond that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fairly easy conversation to have. People mention it all the time as if it's just obvious, it's just human nature. But why does that happen? I mean, my best guess is that desiring more is a good way to ensure that you don't whittle down your resources too much. Like, it's a good survival instinct to keep people alive. That is taken too far.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Laughing to myself a little bit internally, because it seems like every episode I bring up different concepts of evolution. In this particular book, which again we'll link in the description, that just had such a profound impact on the way I thought about things, as did studying evolution in general. But the main concept that I often come back to is behavioral adaptations that can increase an individual's fitness and their ability, not like physical fitness, but their fitness in an environment and their ability to survive and reproduce, which then propagates those genes, and makes that that type of individual a larger portion of the population. And it does seem that in times of scarcity, acquiring more resources or storing, not knowing how harsh a winter might be and storing even more food than you think, or just wanting to have more insulation between you and the outside world, or um, more arrows so that if you have to go to war with a neighboring group, you feel like you're well positioned to do well in that. So that seems reasonable to me, that that is a characteristic that we developed that was helpful for survival. And now that humans are almost completely unchecked in the world except by ourselves, no organism has created what we've created, both in terms of creation and in terms of destruction. Just the scope of influence we have is tremendous due to some of our characteristics. And now that we are in a world where we, our only threats are ourselves, we've controlled a lot of the other things that could pose harm to us. That adaptation that was critical to our survival and therefore imprinted genetically in many of us could be alive and well, even when it doesn't need to be. Because the thing that really struck me about the thing with China is they're a tremendous world superpower. They're doing good, or great, I guess, maybe not in every possible metric, but in terms of the space that they have and the economic wealth that they have, and just security as a nation, I suppose. Why would they want to acquire more? What? Because that doesn't seem like a situation where they are on the brink of extinction or posing significant threat, and that this is a necessary survival thing. It feels like it has superseded that into similar to what you described of, what you have becomes your new baseline, and then therefore you want more so that you can experience something not as neutral as your baseline.
Yeah. And, I don't think it's the point of our discussion at all to talk about why China might be doing it, because they actually might be concerned about their population, because they had the one child policy that I think has actually negatively impacted their population growth, more so than maybe they ever wanted. But I'm reminded of a talk show moment that I watched on YouTube once. It was with Will and Jada Smith before they were a hot topic for being so dysfunctional. When they were known as like a really put together Hollywood couple that everybody admired. And Will was saying that he still fears running out of money, even though he's so wealthy and successful. Probably has $100 or $2 million. Still fears it because of just this childhood notion of growing up without money and it wasn't enough. And so, there's enough of an argument to say that countries, individuals fear not surviving. And the only way to keep that fear in abeyance or minimize it is to continuously acquire more. But I'm not satisfied with that as the full answer. Some people logically believe that you need to keep acquiring more. Now, it's easy for me to think about it in the business context. I was talking with a CEO once who I was saying, my company, I run a company. I don't seek for it to grow 50% a year or something like that, because that would put too much pressure on the employees and create an environment that I don't want to create. And, I made some side off comments like, I want to grow, but I don't need to grow that much. And she's like, well, yeah, you got to grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. And I was like, oh, what a statement. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah. That's one of those great statements that it's like, if you can include the positive and negative version of something in one sentence, it just sounds more compelling. It's kind of like when you
Yeah.
rhyme, it sounds like you're saying something better than you are, even
Yeah.
though it's just a silly trick. And that it's like, well, if you're not growing, and then naturally, what's the other half of that? Well, what's the opposite of growing? Sort of withering away and dying. If you're not growing, you're dying. And people go, oh, wow. It sticks in your
Yeah.
head, even though it can be just kind of a smoke and mirrors way of looking at things. But yeah, I think it's a perspective that's held by a lot of people. And I think while you didn't want to define it, only as the observation you made from the talk show moment, I think that points out something very, very important to this conversation, since we're just kind of exploring this aspects of human nature, the the psychology of humans, obviously, and our blind spots, how we can do illogical things and feel compelled to, right? Like logically, he has enough money, right? I mean, I guess there's endless arguments you could say against that. Well, how much is enough? And as he's gained more money, his spending has gone up. So proportionally, it's, maybe it's going out as fast as it's coming in. Let's ignore those details for now. But the significant thing that I took away from that is this imprinted fear he had from growing up that still persists to this day. And I think that's true for all of us. This is part of how we learn about our world and what it is we need to strive for. And I think that's present here as well. He had this feeling that things are financially insecure. To feel secure and therefore safe and therefore comfortable, and kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have to meet these basic needs to be able to think about other things. If you have no shelter and no food, you can't worry about your place in the universe. You just need to survive. But that aspect of psychology or these aspects of psychology that point to all these blind spots we have as humans, where it's kind of like a squirrel pushing acorns into potted plants in your backyard. And it's like, how many acorns do you need for the winter, little guy? You must weigh like a pound and a half. I'm sure 15 acorns will get you through the winter, but they're just putting hundreds of them there. And there's benefits to the ecosystem that creates more trees to grow. There's this whole balance there that's getting a little bit off topic, but it feels similar, that notion of, it's like the squirrel's putting more nuts in the ground because why? Something in you tells you that you need to do that to survive or to be comfortable, or maybe it goes beyond language, even to just kind of deeper experiences. But yeah, I really think there's a lot of as much sophistication as we have as humans. I think we have a lot of blind spots and things that we are not able to pursue logically because we have our own limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that it is poor evolutionary survival instinct for the squirrel to try to get 50 acorns, only because he could be using that energy for something else that's more valuable, like finding a warmer place to spend time when it's freezing or something like that, or finding a mate or whatever else the squirrel wants to do. That'll help the squirrel be more likely to survive and reproduce, assuming that's the evolutionary goal of squirrels. I'm sure it is.
Yep.
It's all of our goal. In the same way as the squirrel doesn't need to do that and could spend their time on something else, I think this is a problem with humans, where a lot of people, like perhaps Will Smith, spend so much time trying to earn money that they forget about the other things that the analog would be finding a warm place for winter for the squirrel. Like they forget about investing in their relationships or investing in their health properly, their mental health or their physical health. So basically, people spend too many resources on whatever they define as, what they define as truly valuable.
Yeah.
Often they don't mean to define it, that they just seek out one or two things so much, money being the obvious one, that clearly they're putting more stock in those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Humans have a unique ability to, I mean, maybe animals in general, but just bringing it back to the context we're discussing, to fixate on things. Because what I thought of when you were saying that was an example not related to survival, but in the like bodybuilding world, it is a known phenomenon that for the many people who chase, getting really big and super muscular, that they often are not satisfied. And maybe this is the concept you described earlier of what you achieve becomes your new baseline. But it seems to be a concept that pervades different aspects of our lives, not all linked to survival, but it's a thing that, these guys, it's like, you're huge. Why do you continue to work out? And it's like, nah, I feel like I'm small. I'm not big enough, or I got to work on my shoulders. My shoulders are too small, And everyone else is like, Jesus Christ, you win, you don't need to come to the gym anymore. You won. But it becomes this pursuit, and this fixation that does impact your ability to focus on other things. But it seems like that is how we operate in many ways, where balancing our time across multiple things is very challenging. And I can relate to this on a daily basis. For me, it's hard to context switch between tasks. I'm very good at multitasking, but when I'm focusing on a task, I tend to like to stick with that, and then like having an hour doing one thing and then switching to something else and switching to something else, I find very challenging to do. And it seems like that's true of humans at a higher level as well, where the bodybuilder example, they might be foregoing other things that are critical for their health or self-actualization or overall fulfillment or relationships and family, because there's this fixation of like, no, I need to do more, I need to get more, I need to. And that kind of feels related to this concept of more. I didn't anticipate it spanning such a wide spectrum of manifestations, from wanting to have more acorns, to more muscle, to more land for your country, to more money, all these kinds of things. It's really interesting that there is this drive that can be, in many cases, to our detriment or the detriment of other people.
Yeah, there's something up with it, but there's also something so human about it that it's,
Yeah, we relate
like,
to it.
yeah, definitely. I'm thinking of this concept of like universal basic income. I know it feels random to bring that in, but let's say somebody said, I'm going to give you an annuity just for the money side, and then I'm going to switch context. Whatever you need to live right now, you can have 3 times that every year for the rest of your life, adjusted for inflation. So you don't have to worry about inflation making the sum less valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And that, without argument, will take care of your financial needs. I know for a lot of people that would be amazing at first. It very quickly would be like not a challenge anymore. And, maybe they want more because, once you can do something a little nicer, you're like, oh, but there's an even nicer way to do it. So that could be a problem. But I do think people, and I think this is healthy, can switch contexts when they've they're either bored or they've hit a ceiling in one context, and then might say, okay, I want to become really good at a game or a sport or something like that. But then, what if they got the equivalent of the annuity, or that they can have all they want of that? I do think if you kept on playing that game and giving people all that they ever wanted, but they can't have any more of almost everything that you would want to achieve, it would drive you crazy eventually. Like you would actually go, it would be torture, I think.
Interesting.
I think we need it. I mean, I don't know if you do that exercise, do you agree with that? I can't tell, but that's my first instinct, that it would be crazy making.
Fantastic, thought-provoking topic here. My first instinct is that it would be different for different people, because this is, an argument I've heard against the welfare system is like, people need to work for themselves to have any connection to wanting to earn, and that, people, if you just give them money, they're just going to want to be lazy or something. Not saying I agree with this, just an argument that I've heard. Right. And I don't think that's true for everyone. That could be true for some people. Who's to say what the proportion would be there? But I think there's so many different kinds of people that the response to that would be different. My personal response, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because in college, that was my dream future scenario. It was like, man, if I could just have a living taken care of, I'm so curious what I would then do.
Hmm.
And I think I'm someone who's deeply curious, as I hope comes across in these conversations, um, and would just love to see what would be possible in a situation where focus on survival wasn't the core, primary focus of one's life. It's impossible to say what that would be because it's such an artificial way of living. Historically, we all have survived via our own efforts, and there are exceptions to that at times, but largely, it's like there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? If you're getting a free lunch, someone else is paying for it. So someone's got to foot the bill regardless of what the thing is. But yeah, fascinating topic. A good prompt for our viewers as well. What would you do in this situation? Do you feel like it's something that you would want? Do you feel like that you are deeply tied to your sense of achievement and that this would take something away that would impact your quality of life negatively? Or do you feel like similar to me, where it's hard to say what would happen, but that's a dream of yours to be able to focus on? Let us know in the comments below. It'd be very interesting to see how other people respond to that, because I think there's a lot of possible outcomes that we could
Hmm.
see there. One other thing I wanted to mention. So I know that I come back to evolution all the time. In my personal set of beliefs and what I think is demonstrated in our scientific information, that seems to be the best explanation that I've come across for the advancement of life over time. The fascinating thing about evolution is it is not teleological, as they say, which means it's not goal oriented. It's only suited for what is best in that moment, because that what's happening in that moment is the pressure that's being applied to the individual, whether that be being in a very cold climate, and then maybe you're a squirrel or something, and due to random mutations, one squirrel grows thicker fur and it's able to survive on less food because it's not losing so much heat to the environment. Well, that squirrel is going to be better suited. It will then be able to secure more mates and more resources, and then that mutation will rise in prominence in that population. If suddenly things shifted dramatically and it was extremely hot, that squirrel is probably going to be screwed. So evolution is not looking at what would be best as you move into the future. It's like, what's best right now, because right now is the only thing that's happening. Evolution is not thinking this. This is our own human projection of what's happening. But
Hmm.
um but it's fascinating. I think a lot of people don't think about it that way, which is kind of the underlines what we're trying to do with this show, is talk about things that people aren't often talking about. Is that something that you had been exposed to ever, that concept, or does that strike you in a way of like, oh, that's interesting, or that makes sense, or any thoughts around that?
I don't think I've ever thought about that before. The fact that you evolve based on the context you're in and not necessarily for some larger goal. I guess my
Yeah.
first thought is that part of what makes the human mind so interesting and greater than anything we've ever discovered in terms of its complexity and ability is that we do have the ability to think a little outside of our current situation. It's a
Hmm.
mature ability that I think a lot of people either don't ever get to or get to later in life, and
Yeah.
say, this is what I need to do now, but I need to put aside some resources or do some planning for what I need to do later. A person
Yes.
I'm imagining I will be. Um,
Yes, we can conceive of the future that might be approaching, of like, soon it will be time for bed. I want to go to bed at a reasonable time to have a good day tomorrow. Let me start preparing for that. So we're not just flying by the seat of our pants. We do have this unique ability to imagine other possibilities, project ourselves into those situations with varied success, and can make different decisions.
yes, I think about it in the context of parenting. There have been moments when our son was like a baby, when it's like tough to watch him, to be a parent. He crying all the time. I don't know how to communicate with him,
Hmm.
and it would be easier to say, let me see if someone else can do this, maybe a nanny, or put more onto my wife, which wouldn't go well for other reasons. But let's say that was an option. I have chosen not to, whether or not it's a reasonable option. I don't want to. I haven't wanted to just say, let me just have less contact during these difficult years, because I imagine and believe that putting in the time with him in these nonverbal infant years that he used to be in was going to have a lot of benefit for him later on. So it's not even for my benefit; it's more for his. Although it'll benefit me to have a more well adjusted, happier, balanced child. But yeah, that's the example that comes to mind for me is that. But generally, like, I haven't in my life continued to just pursue more and more money, even though I can't say I am like, you know what, I have totally enough. I don't want a single higher end thing than what I can buy right now. I always think about that, and it really can be infinite. You know, you can have a billionaire jealous of another billionaire who has more political influence they can buy or whatever. But I have done something I think is difficult, which is to shift over to try to be more successful in my relationships and in my parenting of my child, and that, you know, has become more important to me than acquiring money. So I'm glad I've done that. But yeah, it really takes a big act of imagination to have made that shift. And you know, I don't know if I could keep doing that.
Yeah, which comes back to the point you made before of, this pursuit of more has to be at the expense of other things, because we all only have so much time and attention to put towards things. So if we are putting all of our available resources into one thing, other things will suffer. It's interesting that you brought this idea that we came up with separately of imagination into that context of using that ability to project yourself out of the moment that you are in into a hypothetical future scenario that allows you to reflect differently on the situation that you were in and bring more balance. And it sounds like additionally thinking of another person who's very important to you, thinking of how will this behavior of mine impact the development or life or experiences of my son as well. So a couple things together is thinking past your own experience and also projecting a possible outcome into the future that allowed you to make a different decision. That's I like that we brought those points into this eventually in terms of how to think about this differently, because there are people who actively are against the idea of individuals having more. I guess this is the crux of communism, perhaps, is like everyone will have what they need to have, and that will be enough, and that will be fine. But it seems like the people that choose that usually do so out of protest towards the innate desire that many of us feel to pursue more or to really hyperfixate on one particular thing. Whereas, like, to come back to the China example, hypothetically, instead of pursuing more externally, they could seek to make things better internally in the country, use the resources they would put towards invading another country into, the money and whatnot that goes into that, into improving other aspects that could benefit the country and the people that live there. So yeah, maybe those are two unique powers we have as humans to supersede what is probably an animalistic desire to illogically pursue, individual things, like, going back to that squirrel acorn example. I don't think a squirrel's like, I think I'm going to get acorns today. I think I need more acorns. I don't have enough. I think we project that onto them when we try to conceive of them from our own human minds, but I bet they're much more instinctual and just acting, as opposed to having the luxury of sitting there, or luxury or sophistication of sitting there and thinking about what they would like to do today. So as humans, we have maybe the ability to evolve past this animalistic desire of pursuit of more when we think about others outside of ourselves that may be important, or project what this activity that we are hyperfixating on might lead us towards in the future. Not a direction I expected to go in, but I like that we came around to this point, because that's very valuable to me.
I think I'm going to keep it going in an even crazier direction if you if you're down.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
we'll save this as our last thought here today.
sure. It strikes me that, like the direction that, China is apparently going in is not a properly evolved direction, not the best direction, the one where you keep acquiring. Because when you were talking about what else you could do with that same energy, time, resources, instead of trying to take over Taiwan or whatever, that they could potentially do,
Mm-hmm.
they could spend that energy making better trade relationships with other countries and working together with other countries, becoming an ally. And I think that would be a more evolved thing to do that would cause them to have more benefit, because I think you can always have more resources when you work together with others than if you just take them brutishly. And
Yeah.
some people could say that's naive, but I think it is somewhat human nature to just try to take and take and kill and just be really brutal. There's a
Yeah.
piece of that in everybody, but I think ultimately it's a bad strategy. I've seen this with primates, a class I took. I found it very interesting that the monkey that is the most vicious is
Mm-hmm.
gets to be king of the hill and get all the mates for a while, but then eventually people team up against him and go behind his back. He doesn't have loyalty. Everybody hates him.
Mm-hmm.
And so they end up getting killed. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the same thing would happen if a country went for world domination or tried to take too much. They would have more of a target on their back. So I think working together in a more evolved way of doing things.
Well, this is where we have the opportunity to buy in on what direction we choose to evolve in, right? Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
what has come up in multiple of these talks is that the world we're currently living in is far different from the one that our evolutionary progress has caught up with. So, in a lot of ways, we are in a foreign world. Why do we all crave sweet desserts when they're not good for our self-esteem and our overall health? Those things are at odds, but we still go that direction. And I think the same could be said of acting violently uh, in an attempt to overthrow or to take, instead of to learn to work together more, or just pursue different means of acquiring. And I think this is where we, as humans, and being very aware of our actions and able to be thoughtful and to consider our actions and what actions we want to have in the future, we can decide to act in favor of a goal that we want to see. It's difficult to go against these base urges sometimes, but this is what I hear you describing, is like they have the opportunity to do something differently. It's more complicated when you have a very large government entity with so much inertia and so many people involved. But I think to bring it back to us and our viewers here, we all have the opportunity to make different decisions for ourselves and to resist the urges we might feel to do something that isn't in line with the way we want to be. And I think it's a very difficult thing to do, but I think it is to pursue a more highly evolved self. And that's something we have a unique opportunity to do as people.
Yes, I think we can end the discussion on that. I think very poignant point, which is the desire for more, which seems unstoppable, can be governed by our values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let us know what you think in the comments. Fascinating discussion for me. Hopefully, you guys felt so as well. As always, let us know your feedback if you want to see longer episodes, shorter episodes. We want to make content that fits what you guys are interested in. So if you have suggestions for topics, and as always, please respond to any and all of the thoughts that were presented in this video, because we would love to hear from you guys. The reason we're doing this in the first place is because of how fascinating it is to get together, converse, and be exposed to new ideas. So taking that and scaling it up to an audience of people is a really exciting opportunity. So utilize that comment section. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. It does help as this channel grows. And please subscribe as well if you want to see more of these talks. And lastly, hit the bell icon after subscribing if you want to be notified when the new videos come out. But yeah, thank you for watching. We really have a great time doing these and look forward to doing more in the future.
Thanks, everybody.